Let's pull the start cord, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us early, all you early joiners. Welcome to the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show. We come at you live every Tuesday right here, wherever you are watching, across multiple accounts and multiple platforms, just the way we like it. I am Chair. I'm here to prop you up as always. With me is Sterlin, noted author, thinker, speaker, and good human. Sterlin, how are you doing today?
Man, brother, I am doing absolutely fantastic. We just had an amazing space, and now we get to come off of that high and come into here. Thank you for the very nice introduction. Much appreciated. The feeling is mutual in regards to the good human bit, my friend. So really happy to be doing this show with you. I think we have a lot of really important things to talk about today, right? Because our world seemingly is in dire straits, but we are here with the tooling, the acumen, the knowledge, and the resources to solve these problems, right? To solve said problems.
I contribute what I can, which might be limited, but I'm good at least one thing, and that's bloviating, and I'm here for it. Yes, we do the X space every Tuesday. It focuses on the Logos circles, which of course the Logos circles are the local movements that are happening actively, I believe, in over 40, if not over 50 cities globally at this point. I happen to be one of the stewards of the Los Angeles circle, but there are circles happening literally on every continent except Antarctica. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think Australia has a circle yet, and shame on them for many reasons, but specifically for their lack of a logo circle up until this point. Sydney, wake up. Melbourne, where you at? Perth? No one knows where Perth is. And our apologies to them, but do something about it. Brisbane, of all things. But yeah, there are logo circles everywhere, pretty much everywhere, excluding island penal colonies. And the distributed nature of them is one of the things that's very exciting to me when you look at other movements, technological or polling activist or what have you. The more widespread geographically they are, the more potential longevity they have. Panspermia comes to mind, of course, a favorite topic of one of our favorite people, I think, mutually, Terence McKenna. He talked about panspermia. How might a mushroom ensure its existence throughout the universe? Well, it scatters its spores in every possible degree and direction and degree in between those degrees until the spore lands in an area that it is able to reproduce. And in a similar way, and I just came up with this, and I probably will use it again because I like it, the panspermia effect of the Logos circles is happening. Now, Logos itself is in still very much its bootstrapping phase, I would say, and the blockchain testnet is in version 0.2. I think the 0.2 testnet just barely got started here. And there will be at least 3 testnets before the inevitable mainnet happens at some point next year. So things are still taking root. The rose bush is growing but not yet bloomed. And when it does bloom, we will nip those buds, but not to put them in a vase, but to clone them. Can you clone a rose bush by nipping the bud and planting it? I don't know. all of you cultivators out there, sound off whether or not that's actually a botanically true statement. I think it is. That's how you clone other plants, right? You ever cloned any plants, Sterling? What you do is you cut it at an angle, and you take some cloning solution that you pick up at a store, and you rub it on the stem, and then you put it in its new home, and it should hopefully take root. And now you have a new plant with the exact same genetics and DNA of the mother plant. And that is what's happening in a panspermic fashion globally in terms of the Logos Circle movement.
Yeah, I really like that metaphor, by the way, thinking about just how mushrooms develop and reproduce, right? Starting with the mycelial network that exists right underground, which spreads. Like thinking about old growth forests, right? Have a very massive, sometimes a massive underground mycelial network, right? And then the mushrooms tend to pop up whenever and wherever. And then of course they shoot spores, right? Spores, and then that's how they continue to reproduce and to grow the mycelial network. That very much is logos. I think that's largely like a thinking about decentralization. There's a lot of people who invoke the metaphor of mycelial networks and fungus. So really like that. Good shit. Speaking of mushrooms and networks, maybe that we can get it if we want to get into a topic for today. We so Chair and I with the community had a really interesting ended on a really interesting topic about privacy and anonymity. And I said, speaking of mushrooms, growing in the dark as well is another like not needing the light is another important part of that metaphor. And I feel like the space that we work in is very much a perfect like literary device in explaining its trajectory. But having a focus on being in the dark, maintaining privacy, I think is really important it's been important. It's important for everyone, but it's important for our space because the developers in this space have notoriously been targeted by a variety of different actors, largely from governments and nation states, trying to come after people for writing code. Aaron Day also mentioned this and talked about it on our space last Thursday via Logos. So we thought we would invoke the topic again. I just want to make sure that we're comfy with this chair, comfy and chair. I like that a lot, and just we can talk. We can decide what direction we want to take it if we want to get into some.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect metaphor in terms of the growing in the dark sort of theme, but it's a very good place to start and to remind folks that there are people uh, who are suffering as a direct result of their involvement in one way or another, usually in a coding or like lately in a coding and developer um, manner in terms of contributing to privacy software that the powers that be would rather not see dispersed. Thinking about the Samurai wallet developers, the Tornado Cash developers, Roman Storm, specifically, who's facing a retrial at this very moment in the United States, and his contemporaries in Europe, and the Samurai wallet dev that was sentenced and is currently serving their sentence. Um, People are suffering real consequences for doing nothing more than shipping open source, unstoppable code. And, that either, you could either be neutral on that or you can support that for some reason, or it can sit not so easy with you, or at least those are three buckets that you might fall into. It certainly doesn't sit well with me. And I think as much attention as we can bring to the fact that developers are being put in jail for shipping code, cryptographically secure code, um, it should be alarming and concerning, uh, or it is to me at the very least. And to think about why we need logos today, why the world needs something like logos today. You know, the idea of the nation state is a nearly 500-year-old idea. It is the system in which basically all people, unless you are in a very select club, a very select class of people, then you are beholden to the laws, unless you're a citizen of Terra Mar like Ghislaine Maxwell. Otherwise, you are beholden to a set of laws that you were born into that you did not choose for the most part, for most people. Some people are lucky enough to be able to change their locations and potentially upgrade their systems, but that is not an option that is available to the majority, the vast majority of global citizens. You are born into a situation, and that is the situation that you must deal with. And most of those situations are not very nice and friendly to things like freedom of speech, freedom of organization, freedom of thought. And they can seem innocuous, but really, freedom of organization, speech, and thought is what can lead to change. And what kind of legacy system wants change? What kind of legacy system encourages people to think outside of that box? Mostly none is my take. I don't know. Maybe you disagree, Sterlin.
No, you and I are going to agree on this point 100%. I mean, there's a lot. So I want to come back to a thread that you tugged on, and I want to tug a bit harder. And this is sort of the original thought process that goes into governments in the first place wanting to come after, or having the capability to come after, developers and engineers for building this tooling. So yeah, I'll get into this first, then we can push it forward. There's this argument, we get into the sort of the argumentative and philosophical component of this. There's an argument that that just people that we sort of disparagingly refer to as normies sometimes will say things like, don't break the law, right? Don't break the law, and nothing bad is going to happen to you, right? Obey the law and everything's going to be fine. So I want to start by like systematically taking this apart, piecing this apart, right? So first of all, just because you have some kind of law doesn't necessarily mean it's a good law. I think most people know that from just sort of an ethical standpoint. But even let's just assume for a minute that there was a good law behind this. Like, you don't want, like, whether it's for financial crimes that the government's allegedly going after these guys, whether it's for quote unquote, for whatever the reasoning being, what's happening here, and a lot of people have talked about this, is that a lot of these guys are actually attempting to stay on the good side of the law, and they're not necessarily breaking the law. What's happening is what has been referred to in the space as lawfare, where the legal system is being weaponized against developers for building tooling that upholds and respects civil liberties, that upholds and respects a person's right to maintain privacy in their financial affairs. So the system has structured itself in such a way that it gives itself permission to systematically attack anybody who it sees going after its financial integrity, the financial system, right? And this is ultimately why there's a couple of things happening here, a couple of threads I want to pull on. One is the Trump administration in the US has publicly made a pro crypto stance, yet there are new lawfare cases against cryptocurrency actors, even that's happening under his regime, like the Roman Storm case that you mentioned that's being tried again, right, is happening under Trump's watch. Our good friend, right, one of the co-founders of Paxful, Ray Youssef, we should try to get him on the space. Probably can't do it though while he's in this situation. But he is being targeted also for alleged crypto crimes committed I believe with regard to Paxful as well. So this is a systematic attack on people who have tried to develop tools and technologies that provide more privacy, that provide more personal obfuscation, that give people financial liberty and financial autonomy. It has nothing whatsoever to do with an actual wrongdoing against a specific person or actor, right? They might try to dangle this idea that there was some kind of victim as a result of these guys' action. And usually they do that through some roundabout way in the context of the case. But typically, that is not fundamentally why governments go after these individuals. And the other part of this that I wanted to tug on is that right now, the US, one of the reasons that it's also taken a like ostensibly have taken a pro cryptocurrency stance is because that it understands that there's power in the technology and there's a good reason to want to hijack it and to try to control. They can't just hit an off button on any of these cryptocurrencies, regardless of how much privacy implications that they have, right? They can't. So the best thing that they can do is hijack it at all the vectors, right? The on and off ramps are hijacked through centralized exchanges. The the community is hijacked through the people engaging in the conversation, right? We saw this in the Bitcoin scaling debates with all the censorship. So there's different areas where these ecosystems are hijacked. But what this ultimately boils down to is that the United States and largely the international community, political community, has a vested interest in protecting the reserve. And this is critical: the reserve currency, the reserve status of the dollar. Right, it's reserve as a reserve global asset. If there's anything that can threaten that hegemony, then in their mind, the world order is ultimately threatened. So this is why, in my personal opinion, why these first world broken governments have systematically tried to come after developers in this space. They want to prevent any type of threat to the hegemony of the dollar, and that's their ultimate goal, I think, alongside the fact that there's always a need to maintain power and authority, and there's something about having privacy technology that an individual's ability to anonymize themselves tends to take that power away, right? It usurps that power. And so part of the goal here is to make examples of these individuals so that they can create what has been referenced in the literature as a chilling effect, right? So a chilling effect is when a person is literally scared to engage in certain activities for fear of government reprisal, right? So an engineer or a developer working in the space, and I know personally there's literal stories you can go out there and read about where engineers and developers have said, no, I'm not going to work in this space. I'm not going to build on privacy tech because of the threats to my personal livelihood, because threats that I might get arrested or raided or otherwise legally attacked by governments. So this is lawfare, right? This is the weaponization of the financial system and the governmental system and the political system and the legal system against actors who are trying to develop tooling to help to protect all of us. So anything that you hear that is antagonistic of developers or saying that they're giving free reign for terrorists or cartel members or bad actors to access, that is all a fugazi. That is all propaganda and nonsense. Where there may be some grain of truth there, that is not the overarching reason that these guys are actively coming after privacy developers. I actually like the direction of this. So we haven't got into the actual some of the more nuanced arguments around privacy, but this is really critical to talk about, I think, and we don't get to talk about it always at length. So this is this is good.
Yeah, and I think about in my mind, it's quite related, but maybe I'll have to build the bridge here. But I think about the level of proficiency seemingly people used to have in terms of maintenance of their own machinery, specifically automobiles, appliances in your own home, plumbing and electrical within your own home. Even, like let's say 2 or 3 generations ago, and I'm thinking in a more United States, American centric perspective. I suspect though that it's similar globally in that the average person that owned an automobile was a lot more proficient and educated on how to maintain that machinery in order to ensure its longevity, but also just to be able to fix something if something arose in terms of issues. People were more educated about it, and it was easier. The machines themselves were designed so that anybody could service them. And I'm thinking about washing machines, plumbing design, even toilets. Um, were constructed in a way that that the owner could maintain it themselves. Now thinking about computers and technology, it's a little bit more complex and requires a little bit more specialized knowledge. But I think what the parallel that I'm trying to draw here is there used to be shop class available to students in the United States in high schools. There used to be an auto, like mechanic class, or sometimes the auto classes were included in the shop classes where people were taught how to use tools and taught how to maintain specific machinery so that there was no reliance on third parties. Well, that's great for the individual to be empowered to be radically self-reliant or more self-reliant. But that doesn't do so much for the corporations and the governance systems that are looking to create a dependency on their services. So very similarly with computers, the internet, software, technology, hardware, increasingly and certainly throughout my life and throughout the time that I've been sort of aware and tracking these things, people are less and less aware of what's going on inside the machine, where and what is being done with the data that they are producing, who that data becomes available to, and how to make the data less available. Now that's one side of things. Then the other side of things, uh, is that we have been, or people are being trained to adopt the talking points of those systems through the media and through the education that most people go through. You are taught to start repeating and parroting these lies. If you have nothing to fear, you have nothing to fear. If you have nothing to hide, etc. People have been conditioned to adopt that as their. You have been conditioned to adopt that as your position. Somebody write that down. You are being conditioned and taught to adopt positions that do not serve you, that serve corporate interests, geopolitical organization interests, certainly not your local community's interest or health or your own interest or health. And so as people adopt crypto, AI, LLMs, they're increasingly less aware. Increasingly less aware. I don't know. Is that an oxymoron? People are less and less aware of what they are giving up in terms of their rights, their freedom, and their privacy, at the same time adopting and parroting talking points that reinforce the adoption of these less than ideal types of services and software. And it's one of the most disheartening things that I have to deal with, and that, like, the people that I am closest with, my friend group, my family group, does not care about these issues, not nearly as much as I do. And I hear them parroting, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. What good is having, like, I don't care if people have access to my entire browser history. I don't care if people have access to, literally the entire timeline of your browser history is a timeline of your own thoughts. Literally, and the technology that is now present within these things is not as innocuous as you might think. But like, my point is that the only privacy that you still have access to anyway really is the stuff in between your own ears, in your own head. But increasingly, that's not the case, and we are allowing things to come in and have access to even that, which is scary to say the least. But the point is that I have some construction happening outside my window. The point is that it's disheartening. There are still, though, people, and it's getting back to Logos, and that there are people that have been thinking about these things for a very long time, probably since the 70s or earlier, really, and then like really throughout the 90s, the encryption wars, and then the early cypherpunk sort of movements started highlighting the issues that people or the population is dealing with now in 2026, but they were very aware that what road this was going down 30 years ago or more. And when we talk about these legacy systems that are still sort of holding their power, those systems operate on 100-year cycles and are planned in 100-year cycles. And that's something that's difficult for most people to fathom and sort of conceptualize. And it certainly was for me when I first came across that notion of like, oh, the Vatican, for example, thinks in 100-year cycles, 100-year terms. Forget planning a year, 5 year, 10 years, a quarter century. No, no, no. 100-year cycles are how these, the most powerful institutions are thinking about operations. So the foresight that the early cypherpunks had in the late 80s and 90s is sort of like, it seems amazing, but I guess my point is it's not that amazing, because the institutions that they're thinking about think in even larger and grander cycles. So here we are in 2026. Bitcoin is 16 years old, and it has become, it's still like maybe the most revolutionary thing that's ever happened in terms of human governance, or the most recent, the most recent revolutionary thing that's happened in human governance, and the potential that it holds within it due to the Byzantine generals problem being solved with proof of work, is that humans, for the first time ever, can coordinate. Humans with diverging interests and goals and objectives, like unaligned incentives, can otherwise coordinate on specific incentives without intermediaries or third parties. I'm not being eloquent enough. I don't think I'm being eloquent enough in describing it, but like it's truly revolutionary. So the first thing that the legacy systems came in and did was co-opt it. And that has been covered very well and at length, but you can look at, 2013 and 3 out of the 5 Bitcoin core devs being on the payroll of certain individuals that didn't kill themselves. And the block size wars that followed about 4 years later that villainized people like, oh God, why am I forgetting his name? That's not good. That's not good. Sterlin, who's our boy?
Roger.
Bitcoin. Yeah, Roger Ver. Jiu-jitsu practitioner Roger Ver, by the way. There's a lot of history to be studied in how these things that have the potential to really be revolutionary, there are really revolutionary, how they became, and how they become co-opted by the powers that be. And it's through narratives, it's through social engineering, and it's through teaching people to repeat certain phrases until you start believing it yourselves, like Bitcoin is just for human traffickers and drug dealers. Who else uses Bitcoin if not those two groups, right? So you see that unfold, and then you see the sort of like passivity that the general public has in terms of like, if our parents look at the case of Roman Storm, what is the first thing that they're going to think? Oh, well, this guy was helping the the human traffickers and the drug dealers. So of course, he deserves a little bit of jail time, and that's probably, and that it's certainly not. I'm parroting, I'm repeating what sort of the people who are less informed, uh, typically what their take is. But like, you can draw, you can draw the line from like the people's sort of acceptance of the type of control and lack of privacy and prevalent censorship that sort of is the norm today, and you can go back 10 years, 15 years and see like where these narratives started from. And I think it's very important sort of contextualizing why logos needs to exist, in that like the previous attempts for one reason or another, of which there have been a few, were co-opted and did not succeed, or at least did not entirely succeed in what their objectives were. Would you agree or disagree, Sterling?
100%. So I was taking notes. You said a lot of really important things, and I want to help try to build on your argument here, Chair. So I wrote down a couple of different ideas. So you were talking when you started this the part of your very nice monologue. We were talking about people, and you went into this topic, or this, you pulled on this thread a couple of times. People just believing whatever information comes their way from the state authorities, from the state cronies and toadies, and also just believing that if something is legal, or if it's related to a law, just obey. That's something I mentioned too, but it plays into what you were saying. And I thought of a book that I have dug into. I haven't read the full book, but I know the basic thesis. It's Harvey Silverglate's 3 Felonies a Day. And effectively, what this book is about is the idea that by the time you wake up, you had your breakfast, you had your coffee, you head to work, and then you come back home and you get ready for bed, you start winding down. Between that span of time, you've committed 3 felonies. The idea is that the legal system is so deeply entrenched in our society, and there's so many laws on the books, that it's impossible for the average person to go about their day and not commit some kind of crime, right? And I think also built into this, and this is really important for our line of argumentation and reasoning here, is that even if you go out of your way to try to do the right thing, they can manipulate the legal statutes and the laws to manufacture a crime that you committed. This is also extremely Kafkaesque, right? Thinking about Franz Kafka's work, I think The Trial, right? And Joseph K. is the book that I'm thinking about, where there's just this like faceless and nameless bureaucracy that hovers over you, and that everything that you do is just completely like everything seems completely nonsensical, right? It's absurdist, because you can be brought to stand before a judge and not even know exactly what you did wrong. And this, I think, has been particularly ahead of its time, or Kafka's vision has been ahead of its time when you look at what's happened to the cryptocurrency community, right? I think the weaponization of law and the legal system is particularly Kafkaesque and dystopian in a lot of ways. And it really, go ahead, Chair, you had a thought.
Yeah, no, and it's like, and who is it serving really? Like, the amount, you think about the amount of money and resources that are being spent just on Roman Storm's case, for example, is probably a lot of people are familiar with that case. And they're prosecuting a developer who has deployed an unstoppable smart contract to the Ethereum network. And yes, certain validators, in fact, the majority of validators, and shame on you, decided to um, censor and otherwise not include Tornado Cash transactions in their blocks. Okay, well, shame on you folks. But basically, like, there's two issues here. Number one, like, it is what, is shipping code, shipping a public goods code illegal, number one. And like number two, what is the point of prosecuting like you can't stop the code. That's it. The smart contract lives on the network. You have to take down the entire network if you want to take down that smart contract. Now, I can't imagine certain cases where like maybe that wouldn't be the best thing in the world, but at this point, like it's almost certainly in the tens of millions of dollars that have been spent and of taxpayer money being spent to prosecute Roman Storm for shipping an unstoppable smart contract. It does not stop the tech itself. It does not stop anyone from using the tech, but it discourages anyone from taking a similar action or acting in the same way in the future. And that chilling effect, well, it's chilling. It's in the name, isn't it? It's scary and it's sad. Luckily, in terms of what I'm aware of, like people are still boldly moving forward. And you know, the bravery of those that decide to continue forward in the face of like basically the most daunting force that exists in the world is commendable, to say the least.
Yeah, and this brings us back around full circle, Chair, with the comment on like the narrative and the mimetic warfare that we're currently embedded in, right? Because the idea of privacy, like the aesthetic of privacy, is having a moment right now, a resurgence or a renaissance, and more people are talking about it. It's being virally spread not only through small mouth noises like we're doing right now, but in the internet. It's becoming part of the architectonic imagination of a lot of different people. You know, I always am suspicious when things become more popular. Call that like the cypherpunk mindset that I have, or just the suspicious mind. But as things become more popular, even if there's not some kind of nefarious motive underneath it that maybe involves an attempted hijacking, as it becomes more popular, there are inevitably forces in the world that will try to not only hijack that message, but also attempt to compromise the movement. And typically it is some type of government institution or government agency. We have a lot of evidence for this. This shouldn't even be a controversial thing that I'm saying. We have evidence that the FBI and the CIA have gotten involved in movements they didn't like. Everything from the like the UFO people, right? The UFO culture people used to have conferences and talk about things and objects seen in the skies. The FBI actually went into that, infiltrated it, because they saw this as a national security concern and they wanted to try to figure out what it was all about. I think the most popular example, one that is referenced a bunch, is Project MK Ultra, right? By the feds, where effectively the FBI and the CIA actually got involved with the counterculture movement in the 60s, and they actually dosed people on LSD, and they were thinking they could use it as a mind control serum. They tried to rout out the quote unquote commies that were involved in those movements. But the point is that whenever something starts to occupy a linguistic niche, right, in a very strong fashion, like privacy, you have to start asking how much are various agencies involved. And we can all put on our tinfoil hat for a minute, but I don't think it's necessary. But just understand that there are people who are trying to control the messaging and control the narrative, act as a counter opposition, right? And so it is incumbent upon us as being members of this space to do what we can to keep the channels of information extremely clear, to keep people in the know about what actual privacy, what actual anonymity looks like, and also to talk about the people who we see as being suspect. And I guess I can get juicy for a minute. So there are projects that have emerged in the quote unquote privacy space that are not really privacy projects. They have claims that they're privacy projects. They talk about the importance of it, but then when you hear their narratives and you look at their technology, they're not actually for creating as much privacy as possible for the individual. And there's usually backdoors, or there's usually some kind of hatch or opening for federal agencies to use. There's some kind of KYC or AML apparatus. So thinking about privacy pools is the first project that comes to mind, which is not actual privacy. And what's his name? Amin Soleimani has actually tried to make the case that it's necessary not to commingle funds with terrorists, and so giving access through the way that privacy pools is technologically structured to allow the feds to actually come in there and look at information, or have bankers be able to look at information. In my personal opinion, that is not a privacy tool. That is a government alphabet agency surveillance tool. That's what that is. So, and this is the thing, when you can package up a technology to make it look like something it's not, it is like creating it's a honeypot, right? The bear sees the honeypot, right? Or the honeycomb, or the beehive, and naturally is attracted to it. So there's a lot of these, and we know that federal agencies are deeply involved in entrapment. They want to entrap people so that they can create a case, arrest them, and everyone can get a promotion. And so this is the situation that we've found ourselves in. Yeah, Chair.
Yeah, no, I was I agree. I agree, and it's it's probably, I think it's more than likely always been this way. I think there's probably like biblical stories and even pre-biblical stories that can be referenced, or like how legacy powers, the tools that they use to co-opt and otherwise co-opt or commandeer movements that threaten the grip on control and power that system has. Again, the modern day, I don't know, there's just so many examples, and you mentioned the MK Ultra program, which like fortunately like 90% or 95% of the documents that serve as evidence, like why do we even know that this program, like the fact that the public is even aware that program existed was like a huge, like it was like a administrational error on behalf of the organization that was running it, that even exposed that the program existed. And once that happened, like the entire warehouse where all of those documents were stored, like I think was burned down. So like what still remains of the evidence of that program that was a result of Operation Paperclip that began in the late 40s and really took hold in the 50s, and that's when MK Ultra started. Like there is tragically little evidence that remains because it was well, it was destroyed, which leads to exactly why things like Logos need to exist in terms of an archive resource, a library resource, uh, for humanity, for people. Like the Library of Alexandria was like the greatest loss of human knowledge, like seemingly the greatest loss of human knowledge in recorded history, because like all of the most important works and influential works that were housed there were burned. And in one sense, you'd think like there's all this technology that's available for people to back up data and to be able to hold on to data, et cetera. But going back to like sort of the first point that I was making is like nobody knows how to take care of their car anymore, and nobody knows how to maintain their own homes and their own appliances anymore, and nobody really knows how to maintain their own data anymore, let alone like do they have the resources to do so, because most of the time you are uploading your stuff to the cloud, or even if you are using local drives and local storage, you are mostly interacting with the outside world and the internet through the browser, that's running tons of JavaScript you never get to see or inspect. It's running all sorts of tracing, tracking, censoring, and otherwise surveilling operations within it. So there is a really big window into your mind, into your own library, into your own personal archive, and saving and backing things up locally, let alone proliferating and sharing them in a way that doesn't expose the people that are sharing or that are being shared to. Um, it's not, it's not happening at the scale that it could or should. And I've brought it up recently. Enemy of the State was a movie that came out in 1998, and it very clearly and accurately and almost like and interestingly, especially for a major Hollywood movie, depicted exactly the type of censorship and control and surveillance that and all nation states have, like in the 90s. The plot of that movie, like Will Smith, the main character, the only reason that he became the target of that apparatus was because he happened to cross paths with a friend of his that, unbeknownst to him, dropped a file. Like the friend knew that they were after him, and he had a hard drive on him that they knew they wanted, and so he put it in Will Smith's pocket in the moment that they interacted, and then he ran off. And now the eye of Sauron was now on Will Smith because, even unbeknownst to him, he was in possession of something that people didn't want him to be in possession of. The same thing can happen to anyone. You can come into contact with someone who is under the eye of Sauron, and now you are under the eye of Sauron just by the nature of your association with that person. And I think if more people realize what that means for their own freedom, for their own safety, for the safety and freedom and liberty of their families, like the implications are gigantic. Because of it, you might be related to, you might have a distant cousin that's doing something that has nothing to do with you other than the fact that you can draw the line between the nodes where they are on the social graph and where you are on the social graph, and that puts you under the eye of Sauron. Something interesting to think about, I think.
Yeah, I think that what this does is it puts. So I know that there are probably people here thinking too, wow, you guys are going down a dark path, right? We are talking about some black pills. We do tend to do these analyses. I think they're really important to do. But we also mentioned it during the course of this conversation. We now are in a position, you know, I- well, I want to come back to this story about the privacy topic being more popular and becoming more popularized. There is a good side to this as well, right? It's not all doom and gloom. What's happening as a result of this too are people are finding projects like Logos, right? There's finding projects like Monero. They're finding projects like Xano. They're seeing that there is an ecosystem of people who are like-minded, who share certain kinds of values. And then there are people also, and I think this is happening, and we even have evidence in our space, people are finding Logos and this community as a result of interest and concern, right? People are starting to legitimately get more concerned about their privacy. They're waking up to the fact that there is a problem. They're starting to see that there are technological solutions, cultural solutions, and social solutions to solve these problems. So yes, while things currently look gloomy and like there might not be a path forward, there certainly is a path forward. And of course, all of this technological infrastructure that diehard crypto anarchists, technologists have been working on, there is simultaneously this burgeoning force for good happening in the emergence of this parallel society ecosystem, right? So we're starting to recognize that people are starting to recognize that the system is inherently morally bankrupt, that it's culturally bankrupt, that it is toxic at its core. And instead of trying to fight back against it or engage in some kind of reformist activity, instead people are saying, let's reclaim this whole territory, right? Let's experiment. Let's be involved with these spaces. Let's build our own communities that don't harbor these values. Let's create a new kind of cultural architecture. And so this is this whole parallel society movement. These are these communities. And I know that we're not focusing on that in this particular talk, but it is just to say that we are reclaiming territory that has been encroached upon by legacy structures that don't have our best interests at heart. So I think there is going to continue to be a widening effort by people not only in this community, but people outside of it to expand its territorial operations and to continue to create a new kind of polis, right? A new kind of cityscape or landscape for these ideas to flourish. And there's a deep amount of fertility in these lands, right? For this movement to continue burgeoning. I think it just is going to be a matter of continuing to build. I think one of the points we're trying to make here is we can't be afraid of weaponization and lawfare. We have to work together, talk about the people who have been victims to the system, continue bringing about the spaces that necessitate the development of this kind of technology, and also do it in ways that allow us to protect ourselves. You know, I'm a huge fan of what Amir and Darkfire are working on. uh, Also Rose, who's involved in this ecosystem. They've talked a lot about developing this dark forest infrastructure, meaning building an infrastructure of deep anonymity that allows developers to protect themselves and to work on this. And by the way, this is something that we kind of mention in context, but maybe haven't said yet explicitly. Just because we're building privacy tooling does not mean we're breaking the law or doing anything illegal, right? Not everything that we're doing because we want privacy means that we're out there in the shadows of darkness trying to be a criminal. I think Chair kind of loosely mentioned this at the very beginning of the space when he said that, oh, because we're interested in cryptocurrency, we're interested in drug trafficking and all the other nefarious stuff that happens online, all the fraud schemes, child pornography, all that bullshit, right? No, it just means that we care about civil liberties. We care about our ability to maintain privacy, and we understand that there are those in power who deem this kind of activity wrong for its own sake, not because there's some kind of nefarious activity happening beneath the surface. So that is why we're here. This is one of the reasons I think we're having this show. I believe strongly and am passionate about making sure as many people know about these ideas as possible, and as many people know about that these technologies exist, and you can start salvaging your personal privacy right now from this, what Shoshana Zuboff referred to it as surveillance capitalism. The idea that all of these institutions want to surface our data and then auction it off in real time to the authorities, to organizations like Cambridge Analytica who want to use it nefariously against us in a political agenda. And so it's up to us to fight back against that and to create the cultural architecture around it to help us fight back against it.
We're at a very critical time in the history of humanity, or I mean, maybe everyone that thinks about these types of themes eventually arrives at that conclusion that it might be the case. But I think like we really we have a choice to make on a daily basis. Like, what software do we patronize? What organizations do we patronize? What do we use on a day-to-day basis? And what does that mean in terms of our liberty, privacy, sovereignty, censorability, surveillability, so on and so forth? And I think viewer Matt puts it very well, I think, and he says you need more than just tech. You need the right people who can use it. I think it's a good point. I would also say that like the tech needs to be built in a way that anyone can use it, right? Like, and I think that's something that, like, in terms of Logos, and the flagship application of Logos is Basecamp, which is a native application that lives on the machine and runs and executes all of the code on the native machine that it is installed on, which is very different from how most of us interact with the data that's flying around on the internet these days. Can you hear the other voices as I'm talking, Sterlin, or no? I hope not. Okay, good, because there's somebody talking like right outside my window.
Sorry, sorry. Yeah, like a little bit, but it's not distracting
Okay.
really.
Well, I want construction workers. They're the best. They're really mindful of my privacy and sovereignty right now. When we are using, like, even the tech that we are using to stream this broadcast across the many different channels at the moment is all completely being executed and run on a server that we do not own. Not me, not you, and not anyone that we know or affiliated with or can come into contact with in any meaningful or reasonable way. It is an innocuous server, potentially thousands of miles away from us, that all of this is happening and being broadcast to the world. And people have been conditioned to accept this. It's very much possible you and I are both running machines that are very capable of doing it themselves, but we have been conditioned through subscriptions and otherwise to use, because it makes our life easier. It's so much easier to just use the cloud. Well, even over just through one generation, people have completely adopted, accepted, and started using that in lieu of learning how to use their own software. And I very much, for the most part, fall into that category. Now I'm very aware of that. And so moving forward, and like there's various, like the thing I am most excited about right now in terms of Basecamp applications is the broadcast application that Alisher has built. Literally an unstoppable radio station that runs from your machine into the Logos Basecamp app and spread out throughout the entire globe for anyone that wants to plug in. And moving forward, we will be leveraging and using that very broadcast app to come to you as an option for for you to engage and consume the crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, private decentralized infrastructure show. Because we absolutely have to walk the walk that we're talking here. So from the spaces that we do and this stream itself and anything else that we need or want to, we can and should be using things like that broadcast, the Logos Radio, Basecamp Radio application that Alisher has built. I forgot why I went onto that thread particularly, specifically, but we need to start using local first tech as much as possible, understanding what the difference is and what the implications are. And I think even people that are aware of it, and like we all make the decision, like, I'm just going to use Google Docs for this. I'm just going to upload this to my Google Drive or whatever because it's so much easier. Or I'm going to use Discord because it's just so much easier for people. Or I'm just going to use XYZ protocol because it's so much easier. But like, humanity has already fallen down the slippery slope. We are at the base of the mountain now. And we either need to find a cave that gives us direct access to the peak of the mountain again, or we need to climb up those icy slopes with the tools that we have to regain the high ground. What's his name? Alex Honnold, free solo style. We must go up the mountain once again, and we climb that mountain by using local first tech, and that in part is what Logos is building and why I continue to be inspired by what Logos is building, because it's one of the last, if not only, hopes that I'm aware of in terms of humanity adopting technology that doesn't screw you as you use it.
Yeah, well said, Chair. I think that was in the course you went on, I think was directly related to Matt's point about having the right people use it. And that really speaks to the local community effort that Logos has brought to the forefront, where the right people are really the people who are trying to tackle very specific issues in their communities and require a very straightforward use case around privacy, decentralization, around censorship resistance because of their work, right? A lot of this local work that we're talking about isn't like mundane, necessarily trivial, even though it may come across as that, because a lot of times this is there's activism, there's deep activism embedded in this work because the issues that we're solving are ultimately governance failures. And once we start solving those issues like en masse in a very coordinated fashion, that probably looks like a threat, right, to the status quo. So having a particular technology stack in place, a public good that rectifies and remedies these particular shortcomings is critical, right? And by the way, you're right on your so what you're talking about in my mind reads as a chair reads as like tech psychology, where people use what they're used to for one, they use what is the easiest, what has the simplest UI, UX. And so we are creatures of habit when it comes to our technology usage. And also, of course, developers and technologists build to this. And it has been, for to be fair to all of us as well, it has been easier to use these types of platforms because developers have purposely made them easier to use. And it's also been extremely difficult without trade-offs to develop a lot of privacy tooling in this sort of ease of use, accessible direction. But that's changing, right? I and I think we're seeing that also in the crypto privacy space as well. One of the people and organizations that I like to really showcase as a shining star or an example of this is Paul Pui, right? Our friend over at Edge Wallet. Edge is very dedicated to a privacy agenda, and Paul is really a diehard advocate of usability. He wants all the privacy features to be there, but he wants to make sure that anything that he integrates into the wallet is very nicely structured, has ease of access and usability, but it maintains all the privacy guarantees possible while keeping usability there. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. Logos cares a lot about this as well, and I think we're going to continue to see it be really hammered in. And speaking of which, I'll say it, especially in the early days of the cypherpunk and crypto anarchist movement, like usability hasn't necessarily always been at the forefront because frankly there is a lot of like highly technically sophisticated people, and a lot of times engineers build for engineers, so it has taken kind of a bit of a shift or a mindset shift or a paradigm shift in the way that we develop. This is a whole, by the way, this is a whole discussion which deserves its own.
Yeah, we could completely dedicate an hour or 2 or 3 just to this topic specifically. Maybe we should next week. And I think it also in a lot of ways goes right along with what I was touching on earlier, and like people have been conditioned to use and expect to use things in a certain way, and then once things become a certain degree of complicated or just like 1 degree more complicated, then they are conditioned to deal with or understand how to navigate through. Because like navigating a bug, navigating a technical problem, whatever, it's like you have to kind of have a framework for it. But I think a lot of people that are using AI and LLMs to build and code that didn't know or aren't familiar with the process that like the development process that existed before tools like LLM assisted like agentic coding. Like they have a harder time because yeah, you can tell it to build something, but then as soon as there's a bug, if you don't have a framework for how to diagnose and fix bugs and isolate things, then it's like then the LLM doesn't make you any better. Similarly, for crypto and like yeah, you can use things until they be like until it's not so straightforward. And then it becomes very difficult to fix a problem, let's say, or even use something effectively, or even understand why doing something one way versus another way puts you at so much more of a risk because people are not given the education that is required. They're not giving the tools and the resources that are required to understand those things. There's not enough importance put on it. There's not enough emphasis put on the voices that do try to push up those topics are not amplified in the ways that they could be, let's say. And like it also falls into the subject of like the only thing that's allowed, only the things that are allowed to go viral. Only the things that are allowed to become popular become popular. And otherwise, especially if it's not useful to the status quo, those voices get drowned out, those tools get drowned out, etc. And so I think the same exact thing um, exists with crypto, and it's the reason why Solana overtook Ethereum. It's just so much faster, man. Oh, it's so much faster. You just click and it's there. It's like, yeah, well, what the fuck are you giving up for that functionality? Like, for all the pitfalls of Ethereum and all the shit that I talk about Ethereum, I talk about it because I love it, because I'm a scorned lover, and I'm pissed that it came to this, because like things like Solana came, and it's like, all right, for all the problems that Ethereum has, at least there's thousands and thousands of distributed stakers compared to like the 100 on Solana, the 100 if that on Solana, for example, that give you that fast throughput, those thousands of transactions per second. Yeah, because there's like 6 people that are validating your transactions, and they're all gigantic corporations, and like they're not your friend. They don't want to be your friend. They just want to extract your money from you, your power, your energy dollars from you. That's why they exist. That's why they choose to be validators on Solana.
Bro,
Now, there's a lot of things about Solana that are cool. The Rust forward and the Rust centric architecture. Like there's things to be learned. In fact, Logos programs look a lot more like Solana programs than Ethereum smart contracts. By design, that's a very specific choice. So I can't like completely shit on Solana, but 99.9% I certainly can. It can get the majority of the log because it sucks. Solana sucks. That's the next show. Solana sucks right after Web3 sucks.
Bro, I was gonna say I can't wait for the chair versus Justin Bonds debate.
I don't even know who that is.
Oh man, he's like okay, so Justin he's been in the space a while. I met him in person at ETH. He has I forget the name of it. It's a crypto capital company. He's got quite a decent following. He does a lot of debates, but he's a huge Solana defender. But he agrees with our sentiments on Ethereum and on Bitcoin. But his like crypto of choice.
But they defend Solana. That's a very interesting position.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think we're running out of time here. I'm not going to completely go into his position, but it's mainly about scalability. Like he defends Solana as having solved the crypto scalability problems. So anyway, you check out his work. Check out his work, and then he goes into spaces and debates all the time. We should have him on the show at some point to get his take.
Yeah, no, the chair is open and warm for you, Justin. Please come through. And if you know Justin, you can send him this. Tell him these guys are talking shit, especially the green hoodie weird guy. Yeah, no, the seat is open for you, Justin, to come sit at the table. I appreciate everyone that is watching along, especially those that are using the chat. Matt, Cecilia, DG, thank you very much. And all of you lurkers out there, the hundreds even of lurkers that are out there, thank you very much for watching and consuming the crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, private, decentralized infrastructure show with Sterlin and me. I'm Chair. Do follow us. That's at Sterlin Lujan, scrolling down there, at Very Comfy, no vowels, VRYCMFY is me. I think you can find us on those handles, on whatever centralized and deeply surveilled platform of choice. But increasingly, there are Logos alternatives for those, and we're excited about them. Make sure you go to logos.co and check out what is being built by the contributors of Logos. And Logos is for the people, and you can and should use it. The Logos blockchain is in testnet right now. You can run a testnet node. You can claim testnet tokens. You can stake them on Logos's proof of stake, in Logos's proof of stake lottery, and begin learning the necessary tools that you will need in order to run a mainnet node. And we'll certainly be going a lot deeper on all of those topics in the future. Right here, every Tuesday, wherever you are watching, is where we will be. I'm very much enjoying these talks that we've been having. I believe this is 4 weeks in a row. How many passes before we shoot the ball? 4. And that's how many weeks we have been doing the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Private Decentralized Infrastructure show. That's a Hoosiers drop, if you're not the movie Hoosiers. I keep it too American-centric. That drop was specifically for Václav, who all of my American references are lost on. And so I do them specifically. How many passes before we shoot the ball? 4. Okay. Sterlin, we've been going for 1 hour and 10. I have a construction crew immediately outside my window, completely distracting me, and I apologize for it. I will be more locked in next week. Any final words for the people before we wind this down, Sterlin?
Nothing in particular. Like Chair said, make sure you follow us at Sterlin Lujan, at Very Comfy. Make sure you check out the continuing show every Tuesday around the same time. Like Chair said, we will be locked in. And we're going to keep trying to bring you as much value as possible. Plus, also, we'll get deeply into the
Sorry, I stepped on you. I was trying to put in a...
It worked out. I was done anyway.
I don't know. We haven't ended the stream yet, but I'm about to hit the button. But I was trying to play some music as we were going out as a bet. It didn't work out, but that's we're still working things out here on the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Private Decentralized Infrastructure show. So it's not smooth sailing every time, and we might lose a leg in the lines, but we'll put a peg on it and we'll keep pirating because we doth inspire to do so. All right. That's Sterlin Lujan. I am Chair. This was the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Private Decentralized Infrastructure show. Share it with your friends. Tell your friends about Logos. Check out Logos at logos.co. And most importantly, download Logos Basecamp at logos.co/basecamp. And we will see you all next week.